All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I want to take this moment to say how excited I am to welcome all of you to SF Parent Action's second ever candidate interview day. So thank you for being here. Today, we are honored to hear from these remarkable school board candidates.
So for our first group here, starting from left to right, will be Commissioner Matt Alexander, Virginia Chung, Parag Gupta, and Jamie Hewley. Let's give them a round of applause. Matt Alexander, please share what makes you one of the strongest candidates for kids in this election, and as the only incumbent here, how your past school board experience and actions impact your candidacy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Alexander. I'm the current vice president of the school board, and I'm running for re-election because I want to continue the work that I've started with my colleagues to really build the schools that our students deserve. And we're not there yet, but I think we have laid a strong foundation. I come to this as an educator. I started teaching at Balboa High School in 1996. And over the past 30 years, I've seen a lot of the incredible strengths of SFUSD, like people like yourselves who are taking a Saturday afternoon to be really committed to this district and to public schools. But I've also seen the growth of some really deep dysfunction, including fiscal and operational mismanagement, lofty rhetoric about equity and excellence, but a lack of accountability for results. And frankly, a bureaucratic culture that too often doesn't listen to our students, to our families, and to the frontline school staff who serve them. So in my time on the board, I've really tried to bring that educator lens. Some examples of what I've brought to the board. I co-authored Prop G, the Student Success Fund in 2022, which passed with 80% of the vote almost and is bringing in $35 million a year for community schools, whole child education in SFUSD. I've led the fight for reducing the size of our overly bureaucratic central office and reallocating those resources. And I worked with the Board of Supervisors to bring in $8 million in city funds to expand the exemplary math program at John Muir Elementary School, which shows what we can do when we have high quality curriculum, instruction, teacher professional development, that we really can achieve excellence for all our kids. Working with my colleagues, we've established really high academic goals, ambitious goals. We've totally overhauled our governance system. So I think we've laid a strong foundation, but there's a lot more work to be done. And I'd be honored to earn your endorsement as the only educator who would still be on the board if I'm reelected, and really continue the partnership. You all have been a critical part in holding us accountable and creating the schools our students deserve. So thank you.
Thank you. I love it. So if it isn't clear already, I'm going to be going down from left to right for everybody. So the next question is to Virginia. Describe what specific value or experience you would add to the school board, and if elected, describe one or more goals that you'd hope to achieve during your service.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Virginia Chung, and I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to you all for being involved in our children's education. I'm here because of my family's experience. So I want to share a little bit. My parents are immigrants, refugees, survivors of communist persecution. And I want to share a recent story that my dad, a memory that he shared with me as we were on a beach this past December. He saw the waves receding, and he was looking out at a piece of land that was about a mile away, a peninsula that was jutting out. And he shared with me the memory of when he crossed over from China to Hong Kong. So through my family's experiences, I understand that there is a lot at stake. And I want to be able to help families like my parents, like others, a lot of our immigrant families here in San Francisco who leave behind a lot to create a better future for themselves and create opportunities for their children. I'm here because I want to contribute, and I want to have a voice for those families that struggle. Beyond just getting to school, there are so many barriers that we face before we can even get to school. And all those basic needs that we need for ourselves to be fed, to have shelter, all those things that we need before we can show up. I want to support those kids so that they're ready to learn in the classroom. So thank you.
Thank you. So for Parag, what specific background or experience prepares you for a role on the San Francisco Board of Education? And what makes you think you could effectively lead it?
Thanks, everyone, for having me. My name is Parag Gupta. The question was, what experiences do I have that help me be prepared to be able to lead in the school board? So, like Virginia, my background, I come from a family of immigrants. They struggled. They made sure that I had the best education possible. They moved to Fremont so I could go to one of the best high schools in the country, one of the best public high schools in the country. That set me up for success because excellence was expected. And we should expect excellence and lead with excellence for all 48,000 of our youth. Now, as to what makes me qualified, I've spent the last 25 years empowering our youth, empowering people to have opportunities. And what I mean by that is currently I serve as an executive of the largest nonprofit affordable houser in the country, Mercy Housing, in which I've shifted the culture of the organization from one where we looked at compliance, how do we check the boxes, to one where we're focused on what are the outcomes, and how do we inclusively set those indicators and then measure against them, hold everyone accountable, and not make anyone feel like we're picking on them, but rather say, if this is what it'll take to make sure we're affecting change, how are we each contributing to that and being held accountable for that? Prior to that, I was the architect of a foundation focused on post-secondary success in San Francisco Unified School District, where we're looking at navigation for new folks that are coming or had never been in a college-going mindset. How do we create that opportunity for them, working in conjunction with San Francisco Unified School District? I know that was certainly the case for my wife when she immigrated and only spoke Cantonese. It was really challenging for her, and it was only by virtue of having a great teacher that told her she might consider engineering that she ended up there. So that is incredibly important and work that I'm happy to have led at the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Parag. Okay. For Jamie, so why are you interested in serving on the Board of Education, and what makes you a great candidate for kids?
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being leaders for our kids and playing the crucial role that you did in reopening schools after COVID. I'm Jamie Hewling, and I am the daughter of a conservative car salesman, drill sergeant, and a Latina working class stay-at-home mom who raised me with progressive Catholic values. And there was a fair amount of conflict in my family when I grew up, as you might imagine. I learned how to be a fighter.
But you want to be ready.
I went to college and I made the perhaps dubious decision to join a sorority. And what I saw was rampant sexual abuse with no consequences against my fellow students. And that led me to be an activist. I led both of the largest feminist organizations on my college campus to hold the administration accountable for protecting students. And that put me on the path to going to law school. I'm the first woman on my mom's side of the family to graduate college, and I'm the first and only lawyer in my family. And I was lucky enough to have one of the first cases that I worked on be right after our own mayor, Gavin Newsom, decided to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. And with that brave step, he put our whole country on a path toward marriage equality. And the entire religious right of the country descended in California and tried to stop it. And I had the opportunity to take that case to the California Supreme Court, and we won. And we put ourselves, me together with other brilliant legal minds, on a path toward marriage equality. It was a job that I was really happy to help finish when later I worked for the National Center for Lesbian Rights and worked on the Obergefell case in the US Supreme Court. So I've been a fighter and an advocate my entire life, and now I'm a mom. I'm a mom of a first grader, a toddler who's going into TK, and I'm ready to fight for our kids.
Thank you. So for the next round of questions, they'll be coming from our parent community. Some might be harder than others. Just to give you fair warning, but these are all came from parents through our workshop. So that's why if it seems like it's hard, it's definitely because people have been thinking it and wanting to ask it as well. So I'll pass it along to my colleague here. Ready?
Okay, Virginia, SFUSD's fiscal status has changed from qualified to negative, and now the state has veto power over district decision making. What surprised you in the letter from the state? What exactly does this district need to do to prevent a state takeover?
Thank you, Red, for the question. It surprised me that the school district doesn't know how many staff are in different teams, and they couldn't answer a lot of questions. About how much we're spending on projects, how many professionals that we have. And it didn't seem like there was a plan to figure out what were the trickle-down effects of those gaps. And the last board meeting with the audit was eye-opening, and being able to understand and starting to see where some of those gaps were and why we were understaffed in some areas, overstaffed in others, and not having oversight over those things. There didn't seem to be a clear plan on how we were going to restructure in a way that would be efficient, that connected those decisions closest to our children. And there was no discussion around how those decisions that were made were going to impact our children. How would it be in service to our children? So there's a lot of work ahead, and I'm grateful to the current commissioners and to the Parent Action and the coalition for keeping an eye on things. My child, he's a second grader at Alice Fong U, and he benefits from your action and your concern. And I'm here to join in with you and support our current board and the work that you've been doing to just keep moving forward and keep making progress.
Thank you. Okay. Prague, our budget problems seem worse than we thought. What do you think about the recent move by the state and what it indicates about our financial position at SFUSD? What exactly does the district need to do to prevent a state takeover?
So let's be clear about one thing. A state takeover would be one of the worst things that could happen to us. And already we face a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to happen to our kids, what's going to happen to our kids' schools, right? My daughter is currently about to graduate from Chinese immersion school, and we hope her school will be open next year. There are three things. So with that in mind, how do we prevent a state takeover, and what are the three? I'd say there are three things that I'm most concerned about. The first, what we can control. Two, what is external to the school that we can't control. And three, the unknown. So let's start with the unknown. The fact that we haven't been able to get a good audit because we just don't have all the information there is really frightening. How are we supposed to make decisions when we don't have all that information there? Two, when we look at some of the internal things that we do have control over, yes, we do need to look at everything with a fine-tooth comb and make as transparent as possible what are the decisions that we're going to make so that we can balance our budget on a yearly basis, right? We're not drawing down upon the endowment that's almost non-existent now, right? $420 million potential deficit against a $1.2 billion. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable for us as a school board and as a school district to give to our youth and our parents. Third, the external. We have to recognize the fact that across the country, we have under-enrollment across a lot of our urban centers. And so with that understanding of this demographic shift, we have to face hard realities. And again, go through with a fine-tooth comb, make sure that this process continues the idea of excellence while also being equitable, but still being very transparent and creating trust once again with our parent community, our teacher community, and everyone within our community, period.
Thank you. Okay, Jamie, what do you think the top contributors were to the extent of our structural deficit? And what would you have done differently if you had been on the school board during these last 4 years?
Well, unfortunately, I think the writing has been on the wall for a long time. We've had declining enrollment. Obviously, that was accelerated by school closures during COVID, which made parents, understandably, take their kids elsewhere where they could get an education. And really trying to avoid making the hard decisions. Unfortunately, we have to meet our budget. We have to make sure that we are working within our means. And I think that kind of kicking the hard decisions down the road has led us to the place where we are. I'm glad to see that the district is taking accountability and moving to make the hard decisions that it needs to make, because we know we can do hard things, and we ask our kids to do hard things every day. But what we need to do is make sure that as those decisions are made, that they're made with community input, with parent input, and making sure that we're protecting the things that are working well in our district, preserving excellence and equity, making sure that historically underserved communities are not further burdened by these cuts. And it's my hope, and why I'm running, that we will have, yes, fewer schools, but full schools, fully staffed schools. There are tons of staff openings at my kids' school, and that's not okay. Kids don't have the supports that they need when that happens. Teachers are overextended when that happens, and we want to give our kids all of the support that they need and all of the excellence and enrichment opportunities that they deserve.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, as the only incumbent on stage, what actions by the school board over the last 4 years, including your actions, developing your own budget in 2021 that the state said would move us closer to state receivership, have contributed to where we find ourselves now, moving under state control? What could you have done differently, and what would you do differently if reelected?
Thank you. I figured I was going to get the hard question, which is appropriate, given my role. Well, so first of all, let me talk about a little briefly about the 2021 budget situation. I did propose an alternative budget. It was never intended to be an actual budget. It was raising an issue, which was our overspending in central office, and it actually worked, because when I did that, what happened was the previous superintendent agreed that we could work with the city to get a report from the budget and legislative analyst that showed that the $60 million of cuts of schools that they were proposing were unnecessary, because we actually were spending dramatically more than our peer districts on central office spending. And we've now reduced that. We were, according to that report that we got after I made that proposal in 2021, we saw that we were spending 27% of our general fund on central office, which is ridiculous. Our peer districts were spending 18%. We've reduced it now to 22%, and the superintendent's committed to getting it below 20 for next year. However, I think, in answer to your question of what could we have done differently, I think that the board has consistently pushed staff and need to continue to push them to fix our financial systems, right? So that a lot of this problem is because we have really, really bad financial systems. We actually had a balanced budget last June. If you look at last June, we submitted a budget with a $25 million surplus in year 3. The reason that we now are, again, trying to close the deficit is because we decided to give over $100 million in raises to our educators, to attract and retain teachers, to fill those vacancies that Jamie's talking about. And so I think that was the right decision. What it meant was we now have to make all these other cuts in order to balance the budget, which we are committed to doing. It's taking too long. And that's why the state finally said, look, you're taking too long to show us the evidence of where these other cuts are going to be. So we're committed to making the cuts, including school mergers and closures as necessary, but it hasn't been fast enough. And I think that's been the real challenge.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Fong Wong. I am a SFUSD alumni parent. All my kids are graduates of the school district, particularly from Lowell, Washington, and Balboa. And I've been participating with the school district for the last 20 years, so I kind of know what's going on. So anyway, I'm glad you're all here. And my first question is to Parag. You're on the board, and you are confronted with a hard issue that will impact different communities in different ways. A vote is coming up on the issue. How will you engage the community prior to the meeting? What criteria would you use to make your decision?
So if a hard vote was coming up, and we know this is going to be the case over the next 4 years, we are going to have to make really difficult, challenging decisions that require a lot of late nights that really hear our communities, especially when we do have school closures on the books. First and foremost, I think it's important to acknowledge different perspectives and that we all come at this with good intention, right? That allows us to come together. Two, having a clearly defined purpose and criteria by which we are making decisions. I know I currently sit as an executive of, as I mentioned, Mercy Housing. We have $4.4 billion in assets. We work across 22 states and make sure that we empower residents, 45,000 residents. We always have to consider stakeholders across community, across our sites, our residents themselves. And in so doing, we're very clear on what is the purpose that we all seek to serve, right? And by having that clear defined purpose and being able to then come to the table around that, that's where, whether it be teachers, whether it be our parents, whether it be our students, we can ensure that we're able to collect the different perspectives, look at the data, make data-informed decisions. And let me just double emphasize that, because we should be making decisions based on the outcomes first and foremost, and then looking at, when we see the diverse and disparate outcomes, what impacts those have, and make sure we gather that input. The most important thing of all this, of course, is transparency with that data, being able to cite our sources so that when people do look at the decisions made, they can always go back to and refer to why those decisions were made for those reasons, for those purposes mentioned.
Okay, thank you. This is a question for Jamie. You don't have a background in education, and we already have a lawyer on the board. Describe how your background, experience, and skills would add to the board's diversity, and in what ways?
Thank you for the tough question. I love it. You're right. I don't have a background in education, but I'm very, very passionate about education. Education changed the course of my life, allowed me, as I said, to be the first woman on my mom's side of the family to go to college. And I know firsthand that education changes lives, families, and communities. That's why I spent over a decade volunteering for Scholar Match, which is very similar to College Track, makes college possible for first-generation students, especially low-income students of color, and many of our SFUSD high school students. I was on the board there for 6 years and did that because I know that we have so many kids, like kids in my own family, like my cousins, who have amazing potential, who are very smart, and do not have the opportunities or supports that they deserve to achieve their potential. Half of my cousins did not graduate from high school. That is not because they are not as smart as me. That is not because they couldn't have gone on to do great things and wouldn't have benefited from further education. It's because they simply did not have the educational opportunities that I did. My own mom didn't graduate college. I was so proud of her when she went back to graduate from University of Washington at the age of 50. And I think that education is lifelong. It's a commitment that we all need to have for our community. As a lawyer, I come at things a little bit different from Lisa. She and I have both been advocates for certain communities, she for immigrants' rights, me for the LGBTQ community. but I've spent the bulk of my career protecting and serving the people of San Francisco as a deputy city attorney. I have deep, deep knowledge of our city, of our government, our electeds, appointeds, our department heads, our managers. I know how the levers of local government work. I have solved problems before. I've brought in $350 million for opioid substance treatment in our city to help fill our budget gap and fix the problems on our streets. I know how to solve problems, and that's what I'm going to do for the district.
Thank you. Okay. This is a question for Matt. You've been an educator, a principal, and now a school board member, especially focused on educational equity. Can you describe a few examples of your actions on the school board that you think had a meaningful impact on uplifting students from historically marginalized backgrounds?
Thank you. Yeah, and as you said, I spent 20 years in the district. First as a teacher, I taught at Balboa, then I taught at June Jordan School for Equity, and then I was principal at June Jordan. So on the school board, well, I mentioned one earlier. So one of the things that's frustrated me on the board, and even before I was on the board, is that we have all these examples of excellence in SFUSD, but we don't always uplift them. And so when I joined the board, when I started asking around, where are the bright spots, right? And I heard about John Muir Elementary School and the incredible work that they were doing around mathematics. And they had this phenomenal increase in test scores in math, but the school district was ignoring what they were doing. And what they were doing was they had teachers they had a clear, high-quality curriculum, which we do not have yet district-wide. They had a clear instructional or pedagogical approach around how to teach. And then they had professional development for teachers, something called lesson study that's really in-depth and excellent. But this project was happening in isolation. So I worked with the city to get, like I said, $8 million to invest to expand that program at other schools in SFUSD. The district wasn't doing it, but once we brought in the city money, they said, okay, we'll do it. So that's one thing. I'm also just really proud of the work I've done with my colleagues. I mean, this has been a collective effort, so I don't take credit other than just being part of a team, which I think is really, really important on the board, for setting really ambitious academic goals. And I give a lot of credit, actually, to Commissioner Jenny Lamb for bringing in the student outcomes-focused governance process to the board. And we have all bought into that. We set really high standards for academic achievement. I think you all have been really involved in that process, and we appreciate the feedback you've given us. And our job as a board is to hold the superintendent and staff accountable to meeting those goals. Now, we haven't seen any progress yet, and I think we're all frustrated by that. We voted down their latest math plan 7-0 as a board, saying you need to do better. So, there's a lot of work left to be done, but I think we've laid the foundation, and that's one of the reasons why I want to run for re-election, is so I can continue that work with my colleagues and others of these folks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, this is for Virginia. Some parents have mentioned that you attended an anti-school board recall in 2022. Can you clarify your views on the school board recall? And did you attend an anti-recall rally?
Thank you for that question. I voted in favor of the recall. I didn't go to any anti-recall event or rally. I had to think really hard at what could have been perceived as that. And I do want to note that I was out there organizing to pass baby Proposition Prop C, so that we can get $150 million a year for early childhood education. And I was out there rallying for Proposition F, so that we could spend the money from baby Prop C while it was caught up in litigation. I've been out there doing census work to count our babies so that we can get government funding for our babies. And I did do some lit drops for candidates who wanted to include childcare in their campaign. So one of them was for Campus for Assembly. So by that affiliation, there could have been that interpretation, but I was never out there organizing against the recall. I support the recall, and I'm grateful to the parents who organized to support and get our school board back on track.
Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Osborne. I'm an SFUSD alum and also an SFUSD parent of 3. I have 3 daughters, and they all attend Alice Fong U. My first question is for you, Jamie. SFUSD's Board of Education underwent a governance overhaul in 2022 under Jenny Lamb's tenure as board president. Do you believe that what do you believe are the 3 key tenets of strong school board governance?
Thanks so much for that question, Meredith. As both of us being former SF deputy city attorneys, I think we know that there's a lot that goes into governance. I have experience myself advising commissions and making sure that they follow all of the best practices and laws regarding governance. And it's really tough. Like, our laws are complicated, but we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing and following best practices. What we've seen is the school board really distracted from its core mission. And so I'm really happy to see the student outcomes focus that the school board has returned to. I think, as it's been previously mentioned, we need to make sure that we're focusing all of our energy on student outcomes, but we can't do that until we fix really basic operational problems in our district. We have huge budget problems. We have problems with our economic controls. We have, unresolved audit findings. We have issues, with Brown Act compliance in the past that have drawn unnecessary lawsuits that distract from serving kids and cost the district money that we don't have to spend. And so, as a school board member, I would hope to really help set the tone with the school board and make sure that everybody is on track in terms of what is expected of us to govern together in a compliant way as a body, not a series of individuals, but as one board serving one district so that all of our kids can get the education that they deserve.
Thank you. So, Matt, you once called our group people who seem to care more about scoring political points than about kids. When we were advocating for schools to reopen, you and the school board blocked Seth Brenzel, a gay dad, from joining the Parent Advisory Council for diversity reasons, and because he was affiliated with us after publicly discussing his nomination for 2 hours. How would you handle similar situations today?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And if I don't remember saying that about SF parents, but if I did, I apologize. I may have, so I don't actually remember that, but if that came out of my mouth, I really apologize, because you all have done phenomenal organizing work, and you've represented the voices of parents in really meaningful ways. I also apologize. I called Seth Brenzel and apologized to him for that whole situation. And I think, you just asked about governance. I think a lot of those things that happened during that time were the result of our poor governance, right? And I'll own, my part in those problems as well. Or even the situation you asked about around in December 2021 when I proposed an alternative budget. Is that good governance to have a school board member proposing an alternative budget? No, but I felt like there was no other option at that time, right? I kind of liken it to when Mayor London Breed sued the school district during the pandemic to try to get the schools open. I imagine the mayor didn't think that the judge was really going to order the schools to be open, and that wasn't necessarily good governance, but she had tried to work through the system, it didn't work, so she sued us, right? And I felt the same way around that budget issue in December of 2021. So I feel like during that whole time period, we were suffering from not having good governance procedures. And so then we were in positions where we had to make really tough decisions. Like on the Seth Brenzel case, what I was trying to say, I don't know about my colleagues, but what I was trying to say is we need more diverse committees, right? So of course we want a gay dad, but we want more diversity, right? To me, that was never about his affiliation with SF Parents, and it was never about him. It was about, I was saying we want a parent committee that truly reflects the district. But we didn't have a governance system or structure to say that to the superintendent. So we got in these back and forth fights that got, I think, misinterpreted in the public. And like I said, I felt really bad about how it played out, because that was never my intention. So that, again, I'm grateful to Commissioner Lamb for bringing in the student outcomes focused governance, because I think that has really allowed us to play our role, to not micromanage, and to hold the superintendent accountable, not just for academic outcomes, but for our values around our guardrails or boundaries, which I think, again, would have prevented that kind of thing moving forward. So thank you for the question.
Virginia, our high school graduation rate is increasing, but our college readiness rate is still alarmingly low, particularly for Black and Hispanic students. What moves would you make on the school board to ensure that students are fully prepared for college and careers by the time that they graduate?
Thank you for that question. Well, we have to work backwards from what we want our children, from where we want them to be. So we want to make sure that they're college ready. And what are the measures in place to make sure that they get there? We can't lower our standards and expect them to be ready. And we have to start early. So if there's anything I've learned from the past 7.5 years at We Children's Services, is that we need to set a strong foundation as early as possible so that our children are tracking and meeting the standards at each step of the way. Similarly, as a kid, I had all sorts of interventions. I was not socialized early on. I was mute for the first 5 years of my life. I had to take extra reading classes outside my class because I could not read out loud in second grade. And I had a teacher who took an interest and knew what I was capable of and believed in what I could do. I also had teachers that did not. So our teachers make a big difference. We want to make sure that all of our teachers are credentialed and they have an easy pathway to get their credentials, to make sure that every child that we serve, particularly our Black, African American, Latino, Spanish speakers, and English language learners, have those extra supports so that they are meeting our standards each part of the way.
Parag, you just got elected to the DCCC. We've had bad experiences with commissioners using this office as a stepping stone, this office being the Board of Ed, and not focusing on what's best for kids while on the school board. How will you remain focused on the best decisions for kids and avoid being influenced by outside political pressures?
I know one of the most frustrating experiences I had as a parent of a child in public school who goes to Chinese immersion school is seeing school leaders do exactly that. Have the stepping stone to then go to Board of Supervisors, whatever it might have been. And that was really frustrating, especially when I'd see school leaders that had no children and had no idea, at least from my experience, of what our families were facing. I felt that incredibly during the COVID era when I was leading the school site council as chairperson. And in fact, most of the time that I've been at Chinese Immersion School, I've been the school site council chair and have worked to increase student voice, worked to increase parent voice on that. That has been my mission. That's also why I went to the foundation that I did to work on post-secondary success. To me, there is no higher calling than making sure that we're serving the needs of our 48,000 students and the families. And let's be clear, the next 4 years are going to be absolutely critical. It'll set the tone for this entire city for decades to come, whether we can keep our families, retain our families, and attract new ones, or whether we continue down this slide. So to me, the DCCC was absolutely critical. Getting elected to the Democratic Governing Board was absolutely critical, and the first step in order to make sure that we had a sane governance system that encouraged fantastic school board members to step up and know that they would have the support of the Democratic Party, which represents 65% of the elected body. In so doing, I knocked on the most doors out of any candidate on the West Side, over 1,000 doors, to make sure that I heard voices. So I want to bring that same activism and excitement and also use that role on the DCCC to really build a crossover coalition to make sure that all our leaders across the city are supporting our students and our families. And that's exactly what I did in the first meeting of the DCCC, was to pass the SFUSD resolution to make sure we were clear on student outcomes, fiscal responsibility, and predictably getting our kids in excellent schools in their neighborhoods.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's give everyone give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much for completing the first stage of the interviews. We could have our second group coming up, starting here from left to right will be John Jerson, Lawrence Lee, Del Medina, and then Supriya Ray. And the first one's for John. So there are a lot of excellent candidates running for school board this year. Describe what specific value you would add to the school board, and if elected, describe one or more policy goals that you hope to achieve by 2028.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Appreciate everybody coming here. My name's John Jerson. The question's about my background and what I would bring, and I came from kind of a math family. My mom grew up dirt poor in Wichita, Kansas. Numbers were kind of a way out of poverty for her. She worked her way to a job at a bank and escaped poverty that way. My dad was raised by a single mother that battled mental illness. That chaos in his home was something that he reacted to by finding stability in numbers. And he went on to be an accountant and now runs a small business that does people's taxes for a living. And as a child, I was a kid who was good at math. And I had a third grade teacher that absolutely changed my life. I went to public school all the way through college. But in third grade, in 1992, before the internet, I had a teacher that decided to teach third graders how to code. And as a kid who was good at math, I loved it and I stuck with it. And after college, I started a company using those skills that I had maintained. I sat in a storage closet at my friend's office because we couldn't afford our own office. And I wrote algorithms that matched people to jobs that they were a fit for. And the company worked really well. At some point, LinkedIn bought the company and asked me to run their core business unit. So I had this wild experience of leading an organization with roughly 5,000 people and a multi-billion-dollar budget. And as I see my kids about to spend the next decade plus in the district, and my brother-in-law's a teacher at June Jordan, I see the crisis that we're in our schools. And I see how directly relevant that experience that I had leading large organizations, managing large budgets, being mentored by people like Jeff Weiner and Satya Nadella on how to do that applies. And I'm not saying there should be 7 people with my experience on the board, but I don't think there should be 0. I think 0 is how we got into this mess.
Thank you. For Lawrence, what specific background or experience prepared you for a role on the SF Board of Education, and what makes you think you could effectively lead it?
Thank you for the question, Alex. Thank you all for coming. San Francisco Parents is definitely a group which is so welcome in San Francisco. I know many of you from a lot of our campaigns working together, if it's recalling the school board, if it's algebra, and if it's our continuing efforts in literacy. And I welcome all the new people here and definitely all the youth who are working hard on all these different topics. Because I was a high school kid in San Francisco. I was a class president, and the important thing to me was to do the high school prom and choose the hotel. So thank you so much. I was with you when you protested the school district about mental health, and I'll be with you going forward. So just as a background, I'm just a regular kid that was a child of immigrants myself. I remember my dad came over as a teenager. He used to have a Chinese dictionary to help him learn English, and I had to help him with his English. I went to Argonne, Cabrillo, Presidio, Lowell, Harvard, and Stanford. I want every single kid, all your kids, to just, as you guys said, to just thrive and just achieve the best they could be. This is really possible in San Francisco for everybody. It's going to take many years to do that, and I'm on for the ride. I'll tell you that because I've been working hard. I've been advocating in opinion pieces over and over again about school safety, about mental health, about so many topics. This is where Lawrence Lee has proven again and again he will work for improving the school district.
Thank you. For Del, it's 2028, and you've accomplished a 4-year term on the SF Board of Education. What 3 accomplishments would you be most proud of from your term?
That we're not taken over by the state, that I don't have any more gray hair, but more importantly, that people feel included, that this is a city that actually works for its kids. I came to San Francisco at the age of 8. My family's from Barranquilla, Colombia. I learned English at Alvarado Elementary School. I also learned how to code there. I had the great privilege of having Ruth Asawa be my teacher. And when I calculate and I think about what it takes to actually keep families here, it worries me. I find it odd that I am so often in spaces and places where I went to schools here and people can't stay here and have a family for more than one generation. That is concerning to me. And so I hope to make an impact in such a way where we have regulatory compliance, where we have a set of systems and ways of being that actually are working to keep students here beyond one generation, of making sure that people are graduating from high school and going on to their preferred fields. But more importantly, that those kids that you all that are studying here, that are planning on graduating here, can come back here even if you study outside of the Bay Area and continue to engage and make the richness that the San Francisco that I know and love.
Thank you. So you can say it. You can clap. Yeah, of course. Didn't say it's not loud. For Supriya, why are you interested in serving on the Board of Education, and what makes you a great candidate?
Thank you for that question, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Supriya Ray, and I am very happy to be here before you today. It's such a pleasure to look out and see so many familiar faces. A lot of us have worked together for the last 4 years on trying to improve the school district. So the reason why I'm running and the reason why I think I would be a good candidate is because I am here to listen to everybody and ensure access and opportunity for all of our students. I am where I am today because of my education. I came from a very vulnerable and disadvantaged background, and I know how hard it can be to climb out of that. I know what it's like to grow up, biracial in a time and place when that wasn't so common, what it's like to grow up with a single mom who was often struggling, and what it's like to be a victim of violence and sexual assault. These are difficult things to deal with, but they can be overcome. And I know a lot of students in our district struggle with similar problems and all forms of disadvantage, whether their parents are working 3 jobs so they can continue to stay here, or whether their parents have other issues that prevent them from fully attending to all of their kids' concerns. So we all wish that everybody had perfect circumstances, but we don't. And I know what that's like. So I'm here to make sure that everybody has a voice. I will always listen to you. And I am also here to make sure that we allow kids a way up and out. I got where I am because teachers supported me, because I got a good education. I went to Harvard Law School. And we can make that possible for other students if we focus on student outcomes and give students the things that they need. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Reddick Thomas, and I have a kid. I'm a parent of an Alvarado kid. So, all right, so we'll start with Lawrence, and we'll work our way left to right on this. I have a few questions here. You have 2 minutes. So Lawrence, much of your advocacy seems to be around Lowell, your alma mater, but it represents less than 5% of the district. We wonder about a district where all students are able to access the programs, instruction, support that will help them meet their full potential. What are the 3 things you would do to address equity and excellence at SFUSD high schools?
Thank you for your question. It's really an important question. I agree with you. Equity and excellence together are what we need in San Francisco schools. And you're right, Lowell High School is only a small part of these 100+ schools in the school district. But I'll tell you what, I rarely ever mention Lowell High School. This is something that is very clear to me. Most of the reason why I'm here is because of understanding that not everybody wants to go to Lowell High School. Not everybody will do well in Lowell High School. So it's important that people understand that my advocacy is just for change. We are tired of the school district and throwing things under the rug and not helping out the educators and administrators when there's so many problems in the schools. This is where I've been doing things again and again and again. 8th grade algebra has nothing to do with high school. It's about getting the kids, especially the kids that are behind in lower school, to get up to where they can succeed in algebra in 7th and 8th grade. I was a person like that. I know how it is in Alvarado High School. My friends had kids in Alvarado High School for years, and I helped fundraise for that school for their computer program. This is something where I know so many people across the school district, and they keep coming to me with all their concerns. And now it's just something where we can see we are almost at that stage of turning the corner, thanks to all your efforts and what's happening with this election. The change is really something that we saw in the March election with the DCCC, and the change is something that we're going to see in this election when we get 4 new people in here. This is where we really can do equity and excellence, and we can be a shining place where so many families would want to enroll in the school district.
Thank you. Okay, Del, you voted no on 8th grade algebra. What do you think the school district could have done differently to address the issue before it came to the ballot? And how should different levels of instruction be provided in SFUSD to support kids who are ready for acceleration?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to give you the reasoning why I voted no. I'm a very practical person. At the end of the day, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't practical. And the frustration that I had was that I knew that this was something that the school district was working on, that certain supervisors were engaged in, and yet this seemed to be once again a politicization of a need that kids have. And I just was like, I can't support this. And as a citizen, at the end of the day, your ability to go into a voting booth and make choices is a thing that we have in this country that I really value. I just didn't see how a non-binding resolution was going to help us get closer. I also want to acknowledge that people are angry, that people are upset, that people are frustrated. I have a lot of those same feelings. When we were mentioning earlier the school, the potential of having the schools being taken over, I was a tutor in Oakland at the time when the schools were taken over in Oakland, and I know what that did for a lot of folks. And I just was like, one thing that is non-binding when we have something else that's looming behind that could potentially be even worse for all of us seemed like a wasted effort. And so from a practical point of view, I was just like, I can't support this.
Great. Supriya, over the last few years, you've publicly advocated on a few key issues that you care deeply about. As an effective school board member, you have to represent a variety of student needs and constantly address a variety of issues. How will you make this transition to a broader focus and away from personal positions on matters? What would you have done? What would you have to give up in order to do that?
So, folks, I've played a lot of roles in my life. I'm a lawyer, I'm a writer, I've been a teacher, primarily for adults, but also for at-risk youth. I've been an editor, I've been an advocate. So I know how to switch hats. This is something that I am very familiar with doing. I know how to be neutral when I need to be neutral. I was in the courts for 11 years of my career, and I had to play a very different role than I am now as an advocate. In the past 4 years, I've advocated heavily, and so I have taken positions on issues and tried to support them as best I could. And I've built a lot of bridges and coalitions. So in other aspects of my life, when I've taught, I've had to engage a group of students, whether they were adults or at-risk youth, and come up with creative ways to figure out how to get them interested and keep their attention and help them to learn and help them want to learn and be excited. So I feel like this is something that I've spent my life doing, jumping around between different sorts of things. And in terms of giving things up, in a sense, to me, this gives me more opportunities. I don't really see it as giving something up. I mean, it is true that I will not be advocating specific policies in quite the same way, but I would like to have a seat at the table and be able to listen to everybody. I've done that my whole life. I've reached out to groups and to individuals, both, in terms of trying to get people to come together, trying to help the most disadvantaged among us, and also trying to build broad coalitions so that we can work toward a solution that the most number of people can support. We really need to hear everybody out in order to arrive at the best solutions. We may not ultimately agree, but if we take concerns into account, we're much more likely to come up with something that will work well for most people and for people to be able to accept decisions that they might not necessarily disagree with and still not agree with and still move forward constructively, trying to find common ground together. Thank you.
Thank you. John, what does equity in education mean to you? What does it look like at a school and in a classroom?
I really appreciate that question. It's one of the things that I think concerns me most about our school district, honestly, is over the last few years, too often we've seen people make these performative moves, do things that sound like they're helpful to equity and are not. And we remember examples from the pandemic, right? It didn't actually help students to potentially rename a bunch of schools. It didn't actually help students to potentially cover up art at Washington High. It didn't help students to not only take away algebra in 8th grade, but then once we had the data in and we knew that it was hurting students for year after year to leave that policy in place. And at the same time, there are good solutions available. One of the most scientifically sound solutions that we have to improving equity, to closing achievement gaps, is to recognize that they happen early. For the very first day, on the very first grade of school, when someone enters the school system, achievement gaps already exist because some families can afford the support that other families cannot. And we need a better early childhood education program to address those gaps and give every family the support they deserve, because that's what every kid does deserve. Now, we do have an early childhood education program in the city. It is broken and it is radically under-enrolled. In SFUSD, in the elementary grade, on average, we have about 3,600 students per grade. In the entire early childhood program, all of pre-K, multiple grades combined, we have 400 something. Too often I hear from parents who don't know this program exists, or they pay their $100 application fee, which we should not charge, and then they literally never get a response. We can do so much better, and it's an investment we can afford to make. And we have to make it because that's what kids deserve.
Thank you. Okay. Dell, which current or recent school board member do your ideas align with the most, and in what ways?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. It's interesting because I don't think like that. Like, I'm not trying to model myself after somebody at all. Like, I am coming with my own unique set of... I am here because my community's asked me to run. In some ways, a slightly reluctant candidate. This was a whole process for me to figure out whether I was going to do this or not. But there was a lot of folks in my community that were like, we want you to run. And therefore, I don't come to this candidacy with a set of like check boxes or a set of things that are before me. It's more like, what are the things that I've heard? What are the things that I've seen people experience while trying to raise kids and send them to public schools in San Francisco? We're a city that's 7 by 7, and there's 74 billionaires. And in the last 10 years, not one of them has set up a new foundation, program, or supported us in any way, shape, or form. We're a city that has some huge gaps, while at the same time processing that we have progressive values. We're a city that prides itself in being multicultural and multi-ethnic, and yet so often we are not in alignment with each other and we're not in community with each other. And that is, all of those things are concerning to me. And then on top of that, you do have the state that's taking a look at the systems that have been running. And nobody's talking about the fact that, I'm just gonna say it out loud, I was reluctant to say this or not. Like, why aren't we questioning the financial systems that we have of whether there's grift or not? How is it that we're having a system that has billions of dollars going through it and there's no accountability? So those are the things that I stand for. Those are the things that I am curious about. I'm gonna come to this work with curiosity. But I am not trying to model myself after anybody else because that would be foolish. Somebody that has the name of Del Medina is already a unique person, and so I'm gonna show up in my uniqueness.
Thank you. Okay. So this is a question for Supriya. Which current or recent school board member do you think exemplifies an effective leader, is a model for good governance, and why?
We all have our own views and approaches to things, but I do want to call out some things that I think current school board leaders have done a very good job of. I very much appreciate what Jenny Lam did, shifting to the student outcomes-based model of governance. And many of you may remember the 10-hour meetings that used to occur before that, and the very divisive and unpleasant atmosphere that often existed at those meetings, with a lot of name-calling and really uncivil behavior going on. So I appreciate what she's done. I appreciate Lainey Motamedi's leadership on the board. She has been very balanced and a very fair and even person, as far as I can tell. And she has brought a lot more order and organization to board meetings. I appreciate other folks. I appreciate actually everybody's focus on student outcomes. That has been a monumental shift for us, and ultimately that's what matters. What matters to our kids and our families and our educators is that students achieve better outcomes. By giving kids access and opportunity, by bringing them the level of challenge that they're ready for, this is what helps lead all of us. We were all students. We have students, many of us. That's what leads us to a better life, to a happy, thriving existence, and very broadly, to a better society and democracy. These are values I want to promote, and I think that the board's focus on student outcomes has made an enormous difference. We still have a long way to go. There's no doubt about that. And I've worked on issues including literacy and math and safety and good governance and outdoor learning and reopening, for example. I've led a lot of initiatives and efforts to try to help in those areas. And if I am fortunate enough to earn your vote for the board, I will continue to do my best to ensure that every student has a pathway and an opportunity to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. This question is for John. If there was one decision the school board got wrong over the past 2 years, what was it? Explain.
I think there are a number of decisions that they've made, unfortunately, the wrong call on. And frankly, I think that the overriding issue right now is the budget crisis that we're in. And the decision to continually kick the can down the road has cost us significantly. We are facing this series of uncomfortable and anxiety-inducing school closures, wondering whether our school is going to be open or whether the school we want to go to is going to be open, because that happened, because people made decisions to kick the can down the road. And frankly, I think not all of it was bad intentions. I think there were some good intentions, but they lacked experience, they lacked perspective on finance, and lacked the understanding to see the warning signs that were coming. Now, if those decisions got made differently, if they stopped kicking the can down the road much earlier, we could be in a very different place. We could be using best practices to close schools. Instead of doing it all at once, potentially closing dozens of schools at the same time and seeing what happens, we could have started with 1 or 2 test cases, engaged deeply with the community, made sure we got those transition plans right, and then learned from that experience and applied it to what we need to do now. We could have created more graceful transition plans. For example, does a 3rd grade student need to switch schools for 4th grade, or could they potentially finish out at the school that they're already at, and it's only incoming classes that would have to go to a different school? We know that disruption like that costs students academically. And that harm, that lack of best practices that we're using right now and the anxiety that we feel boils down to those decisions to continue to kick the can down the road. And frankly, I think, again, the lack of experience to have the insight that that's actually what was happening. As a school board member, I'm confident that I would have been able to catch those red flags. If you read the FCMAT report, it's stark for anyone with a financial background, and I can be confident that we would do the best we can to improve the transition plan.
Thank you, John. Okay. Lawrence, same question as Supriya. Which current or recent school board member do you think exemplifies an effective leader, is a model for good governance, and why?
Thank you for that question, Susan. I appreciate all your advocacy. It's actually two school board commissioners currently. Jenny Lamb has been fantastic over her whole term, and she has personally taught me quite a bit about San Francisco School Board. And currently, Commissioner and President Matamati is definitely someone where I can think very much like her in terms of focusing on the teachers and on the budget and all the things that are not working in the district. I myself have been working very hard to also criticize the district on so many things that they have not done wrong. I myself have been the strongest voice to bring back citizen oversight for hundreds of millions of dollars that have been gone missing for 2 years by the district. And now we are in my second year where we are still trying to get the audits back in shape. I have been doing the work with John and to a lot of extent with Supriya to get the school district in shape. These are citizens, these are not commissioners. And so you guys can also get inspiration on how you as individuals can do quite a bit. What is really important to me is San Francisco is not the only way to do schools, okay? I just had a conversation with a Peninsula superintendent who says San Francisco leaves a lot to be desired. We can do things so much better, and people are coming into my ear all the time about how many things are completely not working right. The audits, the FCMAT, the state, this is something that has to be taken care of now because the people in charge have not been doing the job, even with those people that I mentioned are doing good jobs. Thank you.
So this is our final round of questions for this panel. So we're going to start with Supriya. Supriya, we have someone else on the board who's a public school parent and a lawyer. How do you differentiate yourself, and why would you be a strong education leader? And I say this as a fellow lawyer, so.
I understand. I think you're referring to Lisa Weissman-Ward. And Lisa is fantastic. She's done a wonderful job on the board and does great work down at Stanford. I think that Lisa and I, we may share some similarities in how we look at things, and that's a great thing. But Lisa and I are different people, and we do not have the same experiences. In particular, among other things, as I indicated earlier, I come from a vulnerable background myself. And I think that that gives me, I would hope, some insight and understanding of folks who do come from difficult backgrounds, and that is something that distinguishes me, as far as I can tell, from many other folks who are on the board. In addition, I have an incredible breadth of experience because I have done so many different things in my life. I've worn the teacher hat, I've worn the writer hat, I've worn the lawyer hat, and I've been an environmental advocate at points. I have a very broad range of experience, and I think that that has helped me to understand people who come from different perspectives and different backgrounds in perhaps an unusual way. So I, in many ways, have crossed class lines, right? I've personally crossed race lines. I've personally crossed political lines. A lot of my family, Jamie mentioned that her father was a conservative car salesman. A lot of my family is very conservative as well, and there are cultural differences as well. So I've had this sort of position in life where I've had to make build a lot of bridges and try to understand a lot of folks' viewpoints. And I think that that contributes to my ability to bring people together and my interest and true willingness to listen to everyone and to try to bring their concerns to the front. Whether or not I agree with all of their positions, I really do believe that we can come up with the best solutions when we work together. And I appreciate the diversity of this group. I appreciate that the students are here. There has not been enough student involvement. The administration has often ignored student voice. And I think we can do an awful lot more to make all of our stakeholders and all of our community members come together and serve their interests and needs. Thank you.
John, you have a strong background in business, not in public sector management. How do you think your business sector background would translate to your leadership and success on a public school district's Board of Education?
I'm so happy you asked that question. I think leadership is leadership. And if you look at, I think, the best thing that's happened to the school board in terms of its governance, in terms of the way that they exercise leadership over the last few years, I don't think many people would question it was the good governance program that Jenny Lamb brought in. It's made a huge difference. It's kept focus on students. The person who developed that program, AJ Crable, came from my world. He started a software company, and that governance program is based on a model from corporate America. Because it turns out when you're leading a large group of people, leadership is leadership. And the ability to understand in detail the work that the staff is doing, to see the opportunities that they may have missed, and to support them through the process, that doesn't change, no matter where you're doing it. I'm incredibly proud of the work that I've done at LinkedIn, leading a very large team, and I can see the direct impact that it would have on the school district. I can see, for example, in the work that I've done, as Lawrence mentioned, on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Literally, in the first meeting I had on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, after that meeting, I found millions of dollars in savings for the district. It's clear that that kind of background that I bring, the experience that I bring, can have a very positive impact on the district. And frankly, that's why I'm running, because I do think I bring a unique skill set that matches so well the unique problems that we're facing at this moment with an overwhelming fiscal crisis and frankly, a teacher shortage, and a staffing crisis that we haven't talked nearly enough about. At the beginning of this school year, 20% of classrooms didn't have a permanent teacher in them. 25% of the teachers that we do have are not qualified to teach. We don't bring in qualified teachers fast enough into the district because we don't recruit well enough, and there are lots of problems. It just so happens I've run the world's largest professional recruiting platform, and I know how to fix that problem too.
Lawrence, though you attended SFUSD as a child, like me, you never sent your kids to SFUSD. Why not?
Thank you for that question. Honestly, that's the question that a lot of people ask me, and I welcome that question. My daughter, I'm married to a lady that I met at Stanford, who's half Spanish and half Algerian, went to a French-American school growing up. And we thought as a family, she should get a bilingual education, much like her mom. And we chose French-American International School because we had the blessing of financial things that I didn't have growing up, that a lot of families, thousands of families in San Francisco didn't have growing up. And we can see that that's the choice that so many families make. And this is something that I personally am working very hard on for the last several years to stop happening. Because the better we have schools, public schools, the less people will choose to go to private school, to move out. This is something that I've seen so many parents have been crying about before they move. This is something that's super important. The district does not even care. They don't even look why families leave. This is something that is related to it. And so having parents that are happy, having parents that are getting their feedback addressed, that is something that I've been working so hard about, because the fact that there's so many people like me that have that privilege, we don't want to continue that. This is not a San Francisco we want to have. We want to have a San Francisco that in 4 or 5 years will have a school district which will bring families in. San Francisco can get a lot better financially. All that other stuff is city stuff. But controlling of the schools is a school district. And who's better to do it is the commissioners. And that's involved with overseeing the superintendent. If you guys want to read more about the stuff I have to say, or get a hold of me, I've got a website, www.ll-sf.com, or get a hold of me anytime. There are a lot of people that respond to me on X, so many ways to get a hold of me, and I appreciate all your attention this whole afternoon. Thank you.
Del, you have the final question for our last
boy.
panel. You did not support the recall of Commissioners Allison Collins and Gabriela Lopez. Can you elaborate why?
The thing that I've learned about COVID is that it was a deeply global phenomenon and extremely individual one. And so to me, the recall was extremely overwhelming. I had family members die. I had colleagues that got very sick. COVID was very, very difficult. And so the political landscape of San Francisco was the last thing on my mind. It literally was. I was not thinking about that in any way, shape, or form. And so I did not support it because, frankly, I was worried about my well-being and the well-being of my family. At the time, part of my bubble are my parents, and they're both over the age of 80, and they have a lot of other things. And to me, the recall was about opening up schools, and I felt that that was very dangerous to me and my family. And so it wasn't about the political scope about it. It was about the health and well-being and safety of myself, my kid, my family. And so that's why I didn't support it. I was like, I would like to keep on being safe. And this is the way that I know, according to the CDC, that we can still be safe. I didn't feel like there were any plans in place to be able to have clean air in the schools. And I remembered when we had more than one fire in more than 1 year, and we had to close down schools because it wasn't safe for our kids to be there. So I was like, if we cannot even guarantee the safety of our kids when there are fires and the air is unbreathable, now with something that is little kids and masks and teachers that are older, it seemed like a powder keg. And to be perfectly honest, like, I also was very checked out. I voted as a citizen, but I was not engaged politically at all. I needed to think about how we were going to pay for rent, how we were going to be able to stay in San Francisco, and what were the possibilities coming up with destabilizing one more system politically. I couldn't do it.
Thank you very much. All right, let's give everyone a round of applause for our group. Thank you.